Going live.
Going live. Good evening and welcome to the Obelisk. Tonight's guest is Christopher Knowles. Christopher Knowles is the author of the newly published novel, He Will Live Up in the Sky. He's also the author of The Secret History of Rock and Roll, the music. He's also the author of the Eagle Award-winning Our Gods Wear Spandex, The Secret History of Comic Book Heroes, and the critically acclaimed Clash City Showdown, the music, the meaning and the legacy of the Clash. He's a co-author of the Complete X-Files, Behind the Series, The Myths and the Movies, an authorized companion to the long-running TV series. He's also the author of the Secret Sun blog, and just an amazing author. We're thrilled to have him here. Chris, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Is it okay to call you Chris?
You can call me whatever you like.
Okay. Nish? Oh, she's gone. Her dogs must be barking. Anyway, what's been going on?
Oh, everything. Been an extremely busy boy lately.
Yeah?
Yeah. Well, one thing that I should mention is that I do have a more recent book than American Midnight, which I published in November.
Is that on Amazon?
That is on Amazon, yeah. That's sort of a collection of writings. And I've got another book in the works right now, and I'm also working on a sequel to He Will Live Up in the Sky that I'm real excited about. And I'm also running the Secret Sun Institute of Advanced Synchromysticism on Patreon, and Secret History of Rock and Roll blog. So I've got a lot of I've been a very busy boy.
It's good. It's good.
Very industrious.
I need to join your Patreon. I want to get in on that synchromysticism.
On my Patreon part, which was very, very interesting. So it was scarily accurate. So
what was your moon sign and your rising sign, if you recall?
My rising sign Sagittarius, and my moon sign was also Cancer.
Oh, double Cancer. And that Sag and polar opposite. Lord have mercy.
Well, Capricorn is actually the polar opposite of Cancer.
Oh, wait, Sag. Wait, no, I was talking about Sag.
Right. No, right. Okay. I guess I'll take your word for it.
The Sagittarius, that was your rising or your moon?
That's my rising.
Yeah. Those are my favorite teachers. Sages are good. That's an interesting polarity there, though, in your trinity, fire and water.
Yeah, I guess it is. I have no earth. I guess I have no earth signs anywhere. So that's why I'm so flighty and completely impractical.
You'll do well in the next 9 years when
when shit hits the fan.
Well, as Robert Phoenix has been talking about, we're not going to have any heavy earth to ground us out, so it's going to get crazy in that sense.
Well, that's crazy's been my entire life. So
yeah, same here. I just listened to your wonderful chat with your friend and ours, Greg Carlwood, and very much enjoyed that.
Oh, which one?
The latest one. It was like a month ago or something.
Yeah, that was a good one.
June?
Yeah, the embryos.
Yes.
One. Yeah.
Yes, and that's where I first heard about your synchromystic stuff you're doing on your website and all this.
Yeah, I've been doing synchromysticism actually for about 25 years now. I started doing it publicly, I guess, in 2007, but I'd been doing it on my own for quite some time. And it really actually picked up speed after 9/11. That was sort of the impetus when I really started getting serious about it. And I mean, actually, like the early books I wrote, particularly Our Gods Wear Spandex, was really sort of a result of the synchromistic work. So such as it is, I guess I owe my life to synchromysticism.
Well, what is
I owe my
this?
career, all my riches, all my glory.
The goddess synchromysticism. What is this new thing you have on your privately for people that join your world that deals with this? I think Jerry, you were just talking about it.
You mean the Patreon?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I'm doing the Secrets on Institute of Advanced Synchromysticism, and there's actually there's a ton of material up there already, and I'm doing a lot of in-depth work and just basically sort of approaching it as a discipline. You know, I said I want it to be a legitimate form of woo. You know, I mean, because synchromysticism is kind of a thing that everybody does and everybody can do, and it seems to be like this little, you know, bastard stepchild of all the more exalted forms of divination or whatever, you know, like tarot or astrology or whatever. I mean, I think it's more reliable personally, but you know, there you go.
How can you use it as a divination tool?
Well, it's the same kind of deal where like things establish themselves as patterns. So the longer you do it, the more you see the patterns that are established, and you can start to like, you know, it's a natural flow. It's like, well, this happens, this and this happens. You know, there's a certain sequence of events that you can start to anticipate where they're going to lead. So
you can more easily navigate reality.
Yeah, I think so. And I've actually, you know, in the past couple of years, I mean, my entire reality paradigm has just completely shifted. So I guess it was kind of like almost like a critical mass thing, you know, where I was sort of puttering along in fits and starts and peaks and valleys, and then just really sort of just hit this new reality paradigm. You know, I had to pay a pretty steep price for it, but you know, it's when you're on the other side of it, I just don't see the world in any way, shape, or form the way I used to, which is, you know, it's very liberating. I think, you know, it's very liberating to not, you know, because there's so much gaslighting going on right now, and there's so much brainwash and mind control, and it's just like when you shift outside that paradigm, you know, you have to accept the fact that you're going to be outside the gates, so to speak. But you know, I think there's a greater sense of inner peace, I guess you would say, that you don't, you know, come what may, rain or shine, you know, you start to understand that the world is so fake, and you know, the world that we live in, the culture and the civilization and the society that we live in has just become completely artificial. And, you know, and I'm not talking like in a sort of like a, you know, a cliched hippie sense. I'm just saying that you just realize that everything that we're told is true is not true. And, you know, our science is fake, and our politics are fake, and our media is fake, and just everything is just really fake. And, you know, you start to realize that when you're able to see the architecture beneath, you know, it's kind of like peeking behind the curtain, you know, and you can sort of see the ropes and pulleys, you know, that the stage magicians use. And once you do that, you can never unsee it. You can't unsee it. You can never go back. You can never go back to like thinking that what you see in the mainstream media is any basis in reality, or that science as it's presented in the popular science culture or press has any basis in reality. You just realize all this stuff is fake, and you start to actually see it. You know, you're able to like actually perceive the illusion, which is, you know, I mean, it's liberating and terrifying at the same time, but, you know, I would never go back, you know, because the thing is, you know, one of the things I tell people is like, what's the whole point of this stuff? Like, what's really the meaning of this? And I think one of the, you know, the bullet points that I would advertise is like, you can just stop getting drawn into all these artificial conflicts, and stop being beholden to all the gaslighting and the diversions and distractions, and you can just start to see things for what they are. And like I said, it's not easy, and it can be very difficult and painful, and you can be ostracized and sort of exiled because of it. But when you just realize that the people are sort of sleepwalking through their lives, you can't unsee that. You can never go back to pretending that things are okay, that things are not falling apart very, very rapidly. So,
I
you know,
always
they've been,
find, I always find, Chris, that people that wake up to the world around them and see it as it seems to be, have a deep history with this. It's usually like something in their childhood uh, pivoted them into looking at the world differently, and it's usually outcasts and all this. Where was that for you? You said recently you had a big shift in perspective, but were you always this way?
yeah, pretty much. You know, I don't want to talk about my childhood, and you probably want to hear about it, to be honest with you, because
You don't have to talk about anything you don't want to. I'm just wondering
no,
if you
yeah,
always had this ability.
I don't know if it's an ability. I think it's just more of an inclination than an ability. Just never. When you're on the outside, when you're outside your entire life, it gives you a different perspective.
For sure.
You
And
know?
well, you don't notice it until you're outside of your bubble, though. Like I didn't realize I was so strange to people until I got out in the world.
No, it's true. It's true. But I mean, how do I put this? There are a lot of events and things that sort of accumulated over the years. You know, I mean, it's something that I've just always had this off kilter sort of perspective. That I've always just had the sense of being different and being outside and not fitting in anywhere. And
You always notice the things that nobody else notices.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But you know, you're able to do that, like, because I said, it's the kind of thing where like we're constantly told that things are this way and this way, and this happened and this happened and this looks like this and this behaves like this, and we don't understand that our perceptions are so dictated to us by these narratives.
Yep.
And once you just stop believing the narratives, it's like I said, it just the scales fall from your eyes and you can't go back. And that's both a good thing and a bad thing, you know, particularly as this whole process that we're going through accelerates, and the fact that, you know, this country in particular is becoming increasingly draconian, increasingly totalitarian, and so on. But
door-to-door vaccination coming.
yeah, you know, one of the things that I've been telling people is that you should really watch the movie adaptation of Radio Free Albemuth, the Philip K. Dick book, and it's really frightening just to see how, you know, we're living that. I mean, if you just sort of switch, you know, there's just little sort of details that are negative to the time and place that the book was written, but just as, you know, if you can transpose those, just shift them over a little bit, you just start to realize it's like, yeah, we're living in this right now. We really are. It's wasn't there a song in that story that was the key to freedom? Yeah. So but you know, it's a long, you know, things didn't get like this overnight. No. And they're not going to change overnight, you know. Process. And I think one of the problems that people have, you know, people who have sort of like this heroic revolutionary kind of mindset, you know, for instance, I saw this a lot with the Q people, you know, it's sort of like this, like one punch Joey kind of thing, you know, it's like, well, you know, Trump's going to swoop down and arrest the cabal. And it's like all our problems will just be solved for us. And it's just like, no, that's not how anything works. You know, everything is a process. Everything is a very slow, gradual process. Real change is a very slow and evolutionary thing. It's not something that just happens overnight. I mean, usually overnight change is what they call trauma, right? Yeah. So, I mean, you know, and trauma always creates slapback and all these kind of other unpleasant side effects. So real change is something that takes a lot of work. And it's something that I think about a lot too, is like one thing that I'm always telling myself is I'll see all these things going on in the news, whatever. And I'm always just like, that's not my job. You know, that's not my job to worry about that. I'm not going to worry about this. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm not going to worry about this and that, you know, that the media is constantly telling me that I should worry about. And it's like, no, that's not my job. It's not my job to worry about those things. And I think if everybody sort of like picked their job and stayed in their lane and worked to the best of their abilities, you know, change would not be this as grinding and as arduous, I think. I think one of the problems is that, the whole idea of division of labor is something that people don't really think about anymore, because we're sold these heroic narratives through media and through Hollywood that, first of all, they're all lies. They're all deliberate lies, and they're all lies that are deliberately told to you to disempower you, to cripple you. So if you step away from the whole heroic, I am the Messiah, or I'm going to be part of this messianic movement, or whatever, and you just focus on what you can do and what you can do every day to force the process of change along, I think you're going to be a lot more successful than these, like I said, this whole Q narrative. It's just, it's just, it's something that I see people talking about more like Q, more like people from this, like, I don't want to call them the left because they're not actually the left. One of the things I say is that, like, the left means you're opposed to the power structure. The right means that you are submissive to the power structure. So if you're submissive to big tech and the CIA and to the military industrial complex, you're no longer left. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't matter how the rhetoric has shifted. If you're submissive to the power structure, if you're submissive to the surveillance state, you're an extreme right winger. So that's why I think when I see a lot of people who claim to be left because they use all these catchphrases and buzzwords, it's like, no, you're an extreme right winger because you are more beholden and submissive to the power structure than anybody has been in the history of this country. You know what I'm saying?
It's true.
So yeah, it's absolutely true. But so I see these people talking more about Q than I actually see people, like, who are actually Q people. To be honest with you, I have almost zero interaction or exposure to Q people. Like, I'll see things get reposted on Twitter once in a while or anything, but it's like, I just don't have any interaction with that whole mindset at all. But what I did see of it when it was sort of new and it was coming up is I just saw this, like, it's just so Hollywood. It's just this really Hollywood idea of, like, the lawman riding into town, on the white horse. And they even use those expressions like white hats and black hats. It's like, dude, this is all Hollywood. This is all Hollywood propaganda that you're just trying to transpose or project onto this whole fantasy that world that you're spinning. And I get a lot of grief for this. I had a lot, Q people show up in my comments and say, you don't get it, and you're out of touch and all this kind of stuff. And it's just like, no, I'm not. I saw that stuff. I saw the stuff that became Q back in, like, the late 2000s, 2010s. People like what's that guy's name? I don't know, but people like Wilcock and all this kind of stuff, where, this whole idea of the cabal and then this
Corey.
Dragon Society and
We're thinking of Drake Bailey.
Well, Benjamin Fulford and Wilcock and everything. So it's just like, when I saw this Q stuff, I was like, wait a minute, I was reading this stuff 10 years ago. You know what I mean? Coming from Fulford and Wilcock and all these other people. It's like, how is, it just seemed very strange to me that it was so easily recycled for an audience that hadn't been exposed to it. And again, people get mad at me when I say this stuff, but I'm sorry.
Have you by chance listened to Cliff High's latest video about the Q stuff?
No, I used to follow Cliff High. Q High. Forgive me, Cliff. I didn't mean to say that.
Q High.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that. I used to listen to Cliff a long time ago, I guess. Oh, golly. This might be in the mid 2000s or so. But, his worldview was a little, I don't know, it was a little kind of science fiction-y for me. I couldn't really get a toehold. I know a lot of people, in my groups and stuff talk about his work, but I haven't really kept up with it. I don't have anything against him. I don't want to say, like, I'm not saying anything bad about him.
Sure.
It's just that that's not really my jam.
Yeah, he just put out a video talking about Q and what it represented and how he picked it up in his data, his WebBot data, like 10 years ago-ish. It was an interesting conversation. He's not like a Q tard or anything. He's not into it. But he does recognize that it was a marker, a temporal marker, as he calls them, in his vision of the future as a starting point of the what he called AMREV 2, the American Revolution 2.
Yeah.
Which is
yeah.
a cultural revolution. It's not a physical one.
Well, we're going through a cultural revolution right now. But one of the things that I tell people, and I don't know if this is like reason for optimism per se, but we're going through like late imperial convulsions, late capitalism, late imperial. I mean, this is just, we're going through the same convulsions that other empires have gone through.
Yep.
And what this all is leading to, because I believe that culture and empire and politics and all that stuff are all beholden to the powers of nature. I think we are speeding towards, I don't want to get too, negative or pessimistic about it, but I think we're looking at a period of earth changes that I think are going to just upset the entire apple cart. And my reading of what the things that are going on right now is that, to me, it just seems like a desperate scramble on the part of the power structure to protect themselves. That's why they're buying land on New Zealand, these islands in the middle of New Zealand, or buying land in the middle of like Wyoming,
right,
the
Midwest, around the Great Lakes. Yeah.
Like they're trying to find all these remote areas
and Ozarks down there.
Yeah, because it's like there's just a rhythm to nature. It's all cyclical, and this is what I talk about with synchromysticism: is that synchromysticism ultimately is a way to try to understand the rhythms that what we call memes or symbols, semiotics, whatever term you want to use. I mean, they're all part of this greater process, this of a natural mind that we are expressions of, that we are beholden to in many ways. So if we look at the way these events tend to go in cycles and tend to follow certain patterns, then we can begin to understand them. And it's just that by my reading, I really believe that we are, I don't think we're in a good place right now. I really don't. And I think that the political climate that we're faced with, I think I think it's almost a rearguard action to try and stave off what is happening in the natural world, which I think is going to be the determinant, which is going to be the determining factor in how everything else is going to proceed. And like I said, I mean, I used to be a big sort of Romophile. I used to read a lot of books on Rome and Caesar and all these kind of things, and particularly the late imperial period. And also, how power sort of shifted to Byzantium, that, Byzantium was considered Rome. I mean, they didn't call themselves Byzantines, they didn't call their country Byzantium. They considered it Rome. They called themselves Roman.
Yes.
Because what had happened is that the power structure of Rome sort of saw which way the wind was going and realized that the Western Empire and the city of Rome and these big city-states in the Italian peninsula were just headed in a bad direction. That this power was unsustainable. So they chose a spot. They deliberately chose a spot, that area around Turkey, that it was more defensible, that was more easily defensible because of the Black Sea and the Carpathian Mountains and just all these kind of natural barriers that they could sort of retreat to. And I think that same process is starting now. And I think that's why a lot of these big tech guys and hedge fund guys and all this kind of stuff are buying land in remote areas, because they're smart enough to know that something's coming down the pike. And I think all this fake political stuff that's going on out there is just kind of a way to distract us, I would say. I don't want to sound, like I said, I don't want to sound like, a prophet of doom here, because in a lot of ways I'm not, but I do see that, we're headed down a very difficult path that has been traveled by empires before us.
Well, it's like, this is the thing with everything's dark right now. And so actually looking at it and talking about it is going to be dark because that's what we're looking at in the outer world. And I keep hearing people, and I've done this on my other show too, where I'm trying not to be a doom queen, but at the same time, everything's really dark. And it's important for us to talk about it and not sugarcoat things as we are perceiving them, and to allow each other this leeway in trying to figure out what in the fuck is going on.
In a way, it's a collective shadow work exercise.
It's also a mass trauma event that was put on by a gang of people. And I don't know why that seems to be such a radical thing. When you step back and look at the patents, look at the people that are converging in certain places in the world and talking about stuff that deals with the planet in general, and not see that these things could be, might be connected.
Yeah. So, Chris, going back to your coming turmoil, do you think we're starting to enter into the grand solar minimum, right? And
I've heard so, but I don't have like a background in that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was just curious if you thought maybe the changes to the sun cycle and our magnetic field, there's possible reversal coming up. We're due for one, a magnetic reversal.
You mean like a pole shift?
Like a pole shift, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think those kind of events play into the coming cataclysm that you foresee? No, I wouldn't say cataclysm. I don't say cataclysm. It's a harsh word.
Yeah, it is.
The turmoil.
I think just like a period of difficulty, I think, is the best way to look at it.
So more social civilization issues more than like planet, because you mentioned planetary changes.
No. I think that, well, first of all, I think that the latter are the reflection of the former.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
I mean, we're biological beings that are subject to the forces of nature. So when the forces of nature are in turmoil, we are going to be. It's inevitable, right. Because we are beholden to the environment. I mean, I tell this story a lot, but I want to tell it again because, maybe your listeners haven't heard it. But I think it was 2011. So it was Halloween, right? And there was an early snowstorm, an early blizzard, okay? And we got about 1.5 feet of snow. But the problem is that it was a warm autumn, like the early autumn was very warm. So all the trees were still dressed, they all still had leaves on them. So what had happened is that we got 1.5 feet of snow and the trees couldn't bear the weight. So what had happened is that trees were just falling everywhere. Branches were breaking everywhere. I mean, I was outside. My son and I were trying to keep the pussy willow that was falling from the weight from crushing my wife's car. I mean, we're literally there like Atlas or something trying to hold this tree up. And it was like, I thought I was in like an old World War II movie because so many branches were just snapping. It just sounded like bombs going off. It was like, and I was like, well, what is going on? There's this like little gentle snowflakes falling from the sky. And a thought came to my head that really just was such a game changer for me. I was like, why don't they stop this? I said aloud to myself, it's like, nobody can stop this. There's no stopping this. You know what I mean? There's nothing that anybody can do. And this is when I started to realize that, so much of this comic book science that you hear, particularly sort of in the alternative realm, it's just all lies. It's just all lies. It's just like when, all these very deceptive headlines, this could happen or this might happen. And people sort of see that and they interpret it as like, oh, that will happen. Or that is happening, you know what I mean? Or it has happened, like a lot of alternative guys like, hey man, if they say it's coming, that means they were doing it 50 years ago. I was like, no, they weren't.
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean? It's like, that's such a childish way of looking at the world. So I just realized, like, why did I think that somebody could stop this? You know what I mean? That snow is falling over the entire Northeast, right? And who's going to stop it? There's literally nothing anybody could have done about it. And then the next year, Superstorm Sandy pulls into town.
Right.
And for some reason, I don't understand why. Like I'm about like an hour inland from the shore. I mean, about an hour inland. And we got hammered, and we just got, I mean, we went out the next day, and I thought I was like in one of those like Fall of Berlin movies, you know what I mean? Where everything is just rubble and just like, you know, there were like trees that had fallen into houses, trees that had fallen into cars. People were trapped in their house. You know, we were just walking around. We went up to the cemetery, and there were these like giant oaks that had, you know, root bases that were 10 feet tall, that they looked like dominoes. You know what I mean? Just like knocked over one after the other. And I'll tell you something, it just changed the way I saw the world, because I realized, no, nature's the boss. Nature rules. You know what I mean? The sea rules.
Yeah.
You know, the power of the sea that's expressed through these storms rules. You know, the power of the sky rules. You know, the power of the tectonic plates rules. That's the real rulers of this planet. You know what I mean? Everybody else is just an ant on the back of an elephant. You know what I'm saying? And it's just nonsense. And I'll tell you something, it just started this whole process. But at the same time, simultaneously, I was really sick. And I had this condition that was being misdiagnosed. So not only was I sick, but they were like pumping me full of like morphine and fentanyl and one drug after another, all these benzodiazepines. And I swear to God, it was just making everything worse, because I had an inflammatory condition, but nobody wanted to give me anti-inflammatories because they couldn't make money off the anti-inflammatories. They're making money off of topiramate, and they were making money off of Lyrica and this, and, you know, whatever. And I just got so sick, and I was in so much pain. And I can't tell you the amount of times, like how many days in like within like a 4 or 5 year period that I was just like lying in bed. You know, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't watch television. I couldn't read. I couldn't listen to music. I was in so much pain that all I could do is just like sit there and writhe like all night and day. I was like, it was just like I was in hell. It was like medieval torture. And I was just like, every day I'd be just like, just kill me now. You know, just like stop my heart. It's just like, I can't take this anymore. Just please let me die. And like when I got on the other side of that, right, I was just like, oh, this is all gravy. You know what I mean? This is like the rest of my life. It's just like, you know, my kids are all grown. They're out of the house, you know.
Perception.
And everything is just, you know, this is just extra innings, you know, as far as I'm concerned, because it's just like, I can't, like, I'm not trying to be dramatic or exaggerating in any way, but just like how many days that I just spent like just wanting to be dead, just like wanting to die. And then like getting to the point, like every morning I'd wake up and I was like, is today the day? Is today the day that I'm just like, I can't deal with this shit anymore? Is today the day I'm just like, I'm just checking out? Because if this is going to be the rest of my life, I don't want, you know, I'm done, you know? And getting on the other side of that, it's just like, I don't know. It's very much like being tied to the rack and then being free.
Well,
You know, it just totally changes. Like my like this is one of the things that really just changed my perception of the entire world. It's just like, you know, when you get to that edge and you just like, I know this is not going to work for me. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, you know, the clouds part and the sun comes back out.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You know,
How long ago was this, Chris?
Well, you know, it's the kind of thing that I was started for me in high school, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, it just got continually worse. And it started getting real bad, I guess, in like 2002, 2003. And, you know, like my lost years, you know.
Yours too.
It would be like 2013 to 2017 at least, you know, maybe even a little earlier.
Yeah.
It was just like I didn't even know that kind of pain was even possible, you know. And it was just like, it wasn't like, you know, so there's that kind of pain, you know what I mean? Like that you recognize as pain.
Yeah.
I was also dealing with something, I don't know if you're familiar with, it's called paresthesia. And paresthesia is like when the nerves get all irritated, right?
Yeah.
But they're not sending like those classical pain signals. It's unimaginably worse. You know what I mean? Like paresthesia, you know, it's like your funny bone, you know what I mean? Like you hit your elbow. Like just imagine that all over your body all day.
Yeah, terrible.
Like seriously, just imagine what that's like. And it wouldn't just be like, you know, one expression of that you could kind of adjust to and at least anticipate, because it was always changing. You know, the nerves are always irritated in different ways. And yeah.
This is what gives you this deep insight.
I
think I was wondering that's what I was wondering earlier, though. It's usually these kinds of things, and it certainly was for me. And listening to other people speak like you just did, that first of all, that's a service to other people, getting some of that fruit now. So I see that. That's interesting. I had no idea that you had gone through this kind of pain, this kind of experience, but it makes sense with the wisdom you bring forth.
A trial. It was your trial.
Well, Gordon White had said it was something like that. I was very good at experiencing shamanic pain.
Yeah, maybe.
I was like, believe me, I could have done very well without that experience.
Yes.
You know, like that would be fine. You know, if I didn't have to go through that, that would have been, my life would have been complete, believe me.
Were you a gamer as a teen?
No. I was a punk rocker, man.
Okay.
Hey, me too.
I was a hardcore kid. There
was this role-playing game called Shadowrun. It's still around, but it's basically a cyberpunk with magic kind of game. I love the game. It was great. In order to be a magical wizard in that game, you had to go through what they call the Giaz, where you had this horrible trial you had to go through, and then you became enlightened after that. That's what came to mind when you were talking about your story.
Well, that's the process. It's an initiation.
Gordon White's in the chat. Speak of the devil. Hello, Gordon.
Hey, Gordon. So it's interesting, Chris, because today, a few days, I guess maybe a couple weeks ago, I was having this conversation with Mike Hideous, and I was editing that today. And it was the same topic, and it's about the pathways of pain and how everything, first of all, everything's perception. You were talking about that earlier. You didn't use that terminology, but these types of shamanic initiations, if we want for the common modern meme of it, are a big deal. And I know you say you could have done without that, but who would you be now without that?
I don't know. Maybe I'd be happy and successful.
You are successful, but you're not happy?
No, well, I'm happy. No, I'm happy. I'm actually happier now than I've been since I was like in high school.
Oh, that's
well. See, because like maybe after, I think I was happy when I got out of high school and I sort of got away from my family and stuff. I had I had a lot of problems with my mother and my family and stuff. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I can't really go into, but
yeah.
I remember when I got away from that, I was very happy. And what it taught me, though, is that it taught me that it's that classical almost Buddhist thing where the more attached you become to things or to a situation, the more that you have weighing you down, the more that you become enslaved to, I think is not, it's
yes.
not an unapt term, right? But I think freedom and happiness come from just letting go from a lot of things, particularly things that we're told you need, and it isn't just society, I mean, it's things that whatever your niche tells you that you should have, or, whatever, just your circle of friends or your family. I mean, like I said, it doesn't have to be Madison Avenue or something.
Yeah.
It's we build mind prisons for ourselves.
Right. So, but I think the one thing that I think, the one positive experience, I mean, the most positive thing about the dealing with that pain for so long was not dealing with it. Like that was like a really good thing to come out of that, was having it be over. But I think that I don't know, it takes away your fear.
Yes.
You know, because one thing that I realized too is, so I was on all these drugs. I mean, I was taking like 90 milligrams of oxymorphone a day, which is like taking 18 Percocet a day.
Wow.
And then on top of that, I was taking like stuff called Nucynta, which is sort of like a more powerful Ultram. And I was on like 150 milligrams of it. I mean, this is like zombie doses. I had this doctor who actually got his license pulled. And
Oh,
like
wow.
the thing was like, I wasn't feeling it. Like I was just feeling worse and worse and worse because, I had an inflammatory condition, and he wouldn't give me any anti-inflammatories. Like once in a while, he'd put me on like prednisone. I'd be like, hey, you know what? I feel a lot better with that prednisone. Maybe you can put me, we can start talking about like anti-inflammatories. And they're like, oh, no, this is neurological and we got to do this and we got to do that. And it's like, it's because he was way on the pad of all the pharmaceutical companies. I mean, those guys were in. I never went to the doctor without somebody with those big, cases, those big sales cases and whatever. I mean, it was absurd. And I actually looked him up, and he was making like $3,000 a month from kickbacks from the pharmaceutical companies. But, when I got off those drugs, and I had to get off them because he got his license pulled. I mean, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, him getting his license pulled, because I hadn't really realized it's like, oh no, it's like these drugs are making it worse. It's what's called a paradoxical reaction. And it's very common with long-term opioid use, is that your brain just gets all scrambled up, and like you lose the ability to produce dopamine, you lose the ability to produce norepinephrine and all these kind of, happy pills that your brain creates naturally. So, so then I went through withdrawal. So I went through withdrawal of like, 5 or 6 really notoriously difficult to wean yourself off of, like, drugs that all had like a very high
addiction.
Well, threshold for adverse reaction to withdrawal. I mean, I'm just sort of spitballing here because I don't know the exact terminology, but they all had like a very high dependency profile, let's just say. So that was like, I went from like hell to like the 9th pit of hell. You know what I'm saying? Because the anti-inflammatories hadn't really started to work because, there's so much work to be done because I have what's called trigger points, and it's just like these ropey cords of muscle all over my body. I mean, I still have them, but they don't hurt like they used to. But so I was still in pain. I was still in a lot of pain. And then I was also going through withdrawal. So it was like, just how much worse is my life going to get? You know what I'm saying? But like I said, it's very liberating. It's like, there's a great line in Jacob's Ladder, Meister Eckhart said that, when you're going through purgatory, you don't realize that the devils are really angels, and they're burning away all your attachments to the world. You know what I mean? I love that movie. I watched that movie like, I think more than 100 times, because it just, a lot of like, a lot of stuff that just was very real to me. But anyway, just this whole idea of like, you go through this hell, but it burns away your attachments. You know what I mean? And you start to realize that so much of your suffering really arises from attachments. It's, it's Buddhism 101, let's just say. Mm-hmm. It's true. I mean, it's sometimes cliches are cliches because they're based in truth, right?
Well, there's a lot of association with the hangman and the tarot and the journey of the tarot with attachments. This is when, ready or not, on the journey, you're going to be confronted with them one way or another. And then I guess that changes the trajectory, how you deal with it, your perception, as we were talking about earlier.
Well, but here's the other thing, though, is that because pain sort of elicits like, adrenal reaction. It elicits this like, it's just natural. Like, if an animal's hurt, they're going to be super vigilant because they need to protect themselves, because is the threat that injured them? Is it still in their immediate vicinity? I mean, all this kind of stuff. So, I think that the pain and the addiction and then the withdrawal, and I think a lot of that did open up my perception. I started to see things that I hadn't seen, and I mean, I would say, that, my powers of perception were pretty good before, but it just accelerated, just deepened.
Well, that's why I call it an initiation. And, this is the thing with, for people that haven't dealt with extreme severe pain, it's, I mean, it's not anything like you'd said earlier, you don't want that. And one of the things I've always noticed, and you described this beautifully, is that clarity that happens when you move away from the pain. The day you wake up and you don't feel it is amazing to me. And when you're writhing in it, it's just every second feels like an eternity. And you realize that before that, you didn't realize, you take it for granted, feeling good. And it's easy to get back into that when you're in having when you're not feeling terrible, when you just feel copacetic and everything's good. It's like the perfect temperature outside where you don't feel hot or cold. And then when it comes back again, it all of a sudden, it's like all those long moments while you were suffering before that would go on, this little bit between sessions of pain seems less than a second when you're in the throes of extreme pain.
Well, I'm keeping my fingers crossed, because what would happen is that I would have bouts where I'd have like, a bad week or so, and then it would clear up. So I'm hoping that this isn't just like a little interregnum, so to speak. I don't think it is. I mean, I think that, like I said, the problem would have gone away a long time ago if I had doctors that weren't being controlled by payola from the pharmaceutical companies.
Well, but, that's the good old allopathic system.
Yeah. Well, so the funny thing is, though, is that so I remember back in 2017, I guess. So, when the media and everything really starts getting on this whole conspiracy theorist kick. And I just started talking about just how incredibly fucked up my upbringing was and how incredibly fucked up the town I grew up in. And just all this, just crazy stuff, that was open conspiracies, for instance, a pedophile who had a harem of boys, some of which he had custody of, they were foster children. And he also had just an unexplained money flow. But everybody knew this. It was all out in the open. He had been operating since the late 50s. He wasn't arrested until the early 80s. I just started to realize, from a very early age, I realized that the stories that were told about the way the world is were lies, were false. And what I had done that summer is I started going back, these certain events in my life. I started looking at the newspaper clippings of, things that happened around me or, to people in my sort of my family circle, things that I was told a certain story when I was younger. And then I went back and I read the news clippings about it. And I realized, oh shit, there's the Army intelligence looming over my head. And I was like, wait, what? You know what I mean? So, I
was in a program. Oh my God.
No, well, not like that, but it was just I just realized that things that, bad things that happen to me in my life, not to me personally, but to people close to me, that there's the Army intelligence school because, one of the cases in particular happened right near Fort Devens, which is at the time known as the U.S. Army Intelligence School. And this really huge defining trauma in my life was involved with Fort Devens and the U.S. Army Intelligence School. And I had no clue. I had no clue. All these years I remember hearing the stories about, oh, this is what happened. And even when I was a kid, I knew they were bullshit, but I didn't know until 4 years ago, that Army intelligence was involved in it. I'm just like, what? Are you kidding me? Is this a joke? And, you know, I'm going to have to be like, again, like a little cagey, but there was another major news story that involved some of these same people. It became a huge news story. And if I told you like this person's name and what this was involved with, you'd know exactly what I was talking about. But that sort of, you know, had this whole presence, you know, hovering around it. And it's something that I've talked to Gordon a lot about. And you know, Gordon just basically came to the conclusion. It's just like, well, that's your country. You know, it's like you live in a garrison state. You live in a country that's run by military intelligence.
Yes.
Which is true.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally
And
true.
something that I came to realize that, you know, it's like everything that's going on that people think is this or this or this, it's all, you know, military intelligence complex. That's, you know, my definition of the MIC. So, you know, it wasn't like I was being picked on. It's just that, you know, the area that I was living in, it was particularly concentrated, you know, and people in my family were sort of in and out of this orbit. So it's just like I was around it. And it affects your life, you know what I mean? And it's almost like, you know, when like you get stung by a yellow jacket, like all the other yellow jackets are going to come after you. It's almost like that kind of thing. It's like once you get that friggin' stink on you, it never like, you know, you never sort of can escape that attention. So, but like Gordon said, I mean, you know, I thought that was a brilliant insight on his part. That's just like, that's your country. That's what it's all about, you know. And he should know because he's from Australia, and that's also run by American military
I was just going to say that. He should know.
So, you know, you just kind of, you come to accept it, you know. You know, I don't get paranoid about it. It's just like, I was just like in the wrong place at the wrong time, you know, basically. And
I've always wondered about that idea of the wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, how does that fit into your synchromistic experience?
Well, synchromistically speaking, would be the right place at the right time, right?
Yes,
know, it's
exactly.
Just like the inevitable flow. It's the inevitable flow. So,
Gordon said it's the same as Rome.
Yeah, well, it's true.
Yeah,
it's true. It is true. Like, so when Trump was first elected, and he had all these generals, you know, like running the White House, that eventually all just sort of fell out with him. But like, it felt like very Roman to me. You know, it's like, oh, this is the Praetorian Guard. And then I thought, well, that's just Trump and then his circle. But then like during the election 2020, oh, no, wait, it's even more around Biden and the Democrats. You know, it's just like, they just changed their sweaters. You know what I mean? Like they were wearing like, you know, they're wearing their Patriots jerseys and they just changed them to their Jets jerseys. You know what I mean? That's what it all is. You know, it's like, oh, well, you know, all the conservative rhetoric isn't really playing with the rubes anymore. So let's start talking about, you know, diversity and such and all that kind of stuff. And actually, you know, Webster Tarpley had a great quote that I love. He said, you know, the great lesson for the oligarchs in the Obama administration is that you could get away with bigger and badder crimes under left or progressive cover than you could under right or neocon cover. And I just thought that was like such insightful, because it's exactly what happened. It's just like they realized that if they just, you know, every June they put a rainbow on their logo, that they can get away with murder the rest of the year. You know, and that's true. Or they put like a BLM fist on their, you know, Raytheon puts a BLM fist on their, you know, bunker buster that, you know.
Another corporate entity. It's all intertwined.
And that's a Maoist fist too. It's not BLM. They took it from Mao. Well,
you know, but the whole point is that they realize that, particularly at this point in time, that people have become so stupid and brainwashed.
Yeah.
That if you just feed them the right buzzwords, you can do anything you want, you know? And I think, go ahead.
Chris, don't you think, this is actually one of the things I wanted to ask you earlier. Don't you think, so when you say people have become so stupid and brainwashed, when I look at it, I see, and I'm close to your age, so I have a good depth of perception as far as decades go. And I have always wondered, I look at flicker rates, I look at propaganda mills going before. I mean, we could go back to the French Revolution when they were putting up all the different flyers from the different parties and, things that became very famous that essentially weren't rooted in true historical context, like let them eat cake, stuff like that. So here we have a digital age that came in. We have flicker rates, we have millimeter waves, we have all this entrainment going on from the moment we're little, if we are connected into the outer world of cinema, of pop culture. And it looks to me like it has been a plan. It looks to me like it's been social engineering, as they say. And so
of course, yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. So everyone's got a low attention rate because that's what the design was.
Well, I think a lot of it's fear too. I think a lot of people act contrary to the way that they know is moral and right because they're afraid. And I think with good reason. I mean, the security state has become very effective at
yes.
But they're afraid of the wrong things.
Punishing dissidents. Yes, they are, but I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, a lot of it too, I mean, I have to say that I think a lot of it is very venal and petty. It's like, well, if I go against, this insane policy, I'm going to lose my tenure at university.
Right.
My cushy job where I only have to work 6 months out of the year, and then I can spend the rest of the year working on my books, and I make $400,000 a year or whatever, and then I can go out and get $10,000 speaking fees and all this kind of stuff. It's like, I don't want to get off the gravy train, so I'm going to just go along with whatever bullshit they're telling me to spin, because I know that if I stop, that's the repercussions, and I see this so much on Twitter. But I mean, one thing that I really have to say, and I mean, maybe you guys are going to, I'm just going to lose you right here. I mean, but I think that, we are dealing with spiritual forces. I think we're dealing with demonic forces.
Yep.
And I don't, I'm not saying, when I use that word, people get, a little hung up. I mean, I don't use demonic in the term like, Asmodeus and, medieval.
We understand what you're saying.
Yeah, dark energy.
Dark energies, exactly. Dark energies that are, as much a force of nature, as anything else.
Yeah, no, we're all about the demons. Bring it on.
Yeah.
Well,
so I mean, it's almost like
energies.
mosquitoes, So like that's always like, or deer ticks or something. It's just like the deer ticks of the spiritual world. But I just see I really see it like the combination of like the poor nutrition, the bad medicines, the addiction to things like video games and so on. Yes. It's just this cumulative process that you see almost a classical profile of demonic possession. Mm-hmm. And again, it's like, I'm not talking about
Christian demons.
Yeah. We know what you're talking about. And everyone.
Well, see, here's the problem. So here's the problem. So like, I'm just like anybody else. Like when people would talk about demons, I would just be like, are you fucking kidding me? Right. I mean, like some idiot in some backwoods church just acting hysterical for attention, you know what I mean? Like quote unquote exorcism,
right?
Just like all this just complete and utter nonsense. And I think the combination of like bad fake Christianity and then like Hollywood just created this whole image that is just ridiculous. You know what I mean? Just like people are going to naturally have an aversion to that if they're allowing themselves to be programmed by the media. Because, what you're presented with is ridiculous, like Bob Larson or something, just this utter nonsense, these hucksters and grifters, right? But if you start to look at like spiritual energies as forces, forces of nature, like almost like confluences of energies, and you realize how it is almost like this disease that when the immune system is lowered, it's like being infected with a bacteria. To me, it's like the exact same thing. It's like, again, like, if your immune system, if your spiritual or moral or just psychic immune system is weakened, you become susceptible to these things. And again, it is a force of nature. It is an energetic phenomenon. And, that's just the way it is. But, it's like, I wish there was another word for it. You know what I mean? I really do. It's like malevolent energies. I mean, I don't know what terminology to use, because it's like, demon. Well, first of all, demon. I mean, listen, I read, like I said, I was a big Romophile. So you understand like demons, daemons, they're just spiritual energies, they're good, bad, or indifferent. You know what I mean? and there seems to be part of like the air, you know what I mean, like this the spiritual world, spirit obviously comes from breathing, right? So like it's a very effective word, and it's very to the point. But again, it's like the same problem that you have is this: people just have like, they just picture like The Exorcist.
It's got a lot of baggage.
Yeah, I mean, I think The Exorcist is a great work of cinema, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
But I think it's a very disgusting and ugly film, particularly in light of what we know about like the way some of these Catholic priests have behaved, you know what I mean? It's like, would anybody accept like a movie today of like two Catholic priests are alone in a room with this sexually precocious 13-year-old girl? I mean, you know what I mean? That seems a little dodgy, right? You couldn't really get away with making that movie today.
Probably not.
But I think there's something like very ugly about that movie. But I think that sort of just adds to the friction, So I mean, I think what William Friedkin did was brilliant. But William Peter Blatty, I don't know if you guys knew this, but he was actually a military intelligence information warfare expert in the 1960s. So there you go.
Take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, but so all this like Hollywood bullshit just really sort of colored this discussion, which I find really unfortunate. So like maybe we do need to sort of establish a different vocabulary to deal with these topics. But again, I mean, it's just like you just see it. You just see people who just, okay, you can say they're psychotic or they're schizophrenic or whatever. But here's the thing: if you really talk to psychiatrists or psychologists, they don't understand how any of this shit works. I mean, they don't even understand how consciousness arises. Like they literally don't. They don't understand how it works. They don't understand how self-conscious. Yeah, it's all speculation.
Yeah,
but
theoretics.
If you talk to like a good psychiatrist or psychologist, they'll tell you it's like, we don't know how the mind works. They just treat symptoms. You know what I mean? So somebody will come in who's schizophrenic, right? They don't treat the schizophrenia. They can't make the schizophrenia go away. They just manage the symptoms. Somebody can have a halfway productive life because the symptoms that they have are kind of kept in check. But the other problem is too, is that, these drugs have, I mean, I was actually on one of these drugs. I was on Zyprexa, right? It was given to me as a sleep drug. And it's just like, this is how crazy this doctor was. He's giving me an antipsychotic as a sleeping aid. You know what I mean? It's just like, forget about it. It was horrible, horrible drug. But, once, I put on all the weight, put on a ton of weight when I was all these drugs. And I've seen people who are either schizophrenic and or psychotic, and they get on drugs like Zyprexa, which is actually sort of, it's almost like in the benzodiazepine family, but they get on these drugs and they start to put on a lot of weight, and a lot of them just become zombified. So what happens is that the doctors are actually treating the symptoms. They're not treating the core of the issue. And like one of my favorite books is Altered States by Patty Chayefsky.
Oh yeah.
And he did a ton of research into schizophrenia when he was writing that book. And, there's a great line in the book, with the William Hurt character in the book. He says, he's asked about schizophrenia. He goes, I'm not even sure it's a disease. You know what I mean? Because you start to realize that it's some sort of change in basic consciousness. You know what I mean? So, schizophrenics can perceive a lot of the things that you see in like synchromysticism and so on, but they can't organize them.
Their filters are gone.
Yeah, the filters are gone. But one of the things I always say is that like for instance, the Dadaists and Surrealists, they saw schizophrenia as like almost like as a holy state. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, it's like a blessed state, because schizophrenics seem to have like access to other realms of existence and so on, maybe even other dimensions, I don't know. But you realize that these medicines, like I said, all they do is usually just treat the symptoms, and usually just temporarily. The disease has a powerful tendency to learn how to outsmart them.
Well, the body does. What, Chris, I'm curious about your perspective on Carl Gustav Jung. He really did a lot of work in the world dealing with psychosis and a way to process psychosis. I mean, it's the foundation of his work. To process psychosis without medicine, to do it in almost, I mean, he used alchemy. Psychology and Alchemy is an amazing book. He used these processes that were the alchemical process, but through the psychological template over it, and then did the whole Jungian thing. So I'm not going to get into all that. And I'm wondering where you stand on that kind of information, because there's a lot of credible work and analysis out in the world, and there has been for a century now.
Well, yeah, I mean, Jung had
through that.
Well, Jung had just unimaginable influence on me in my early days. I mean, like, really, the thing that kicked me off with synchromysticism was Man and His Symbols.
Yes.
Book, you know,
that's essays. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but Jung also taught me like how to organize things, how to take phenomena that's seen as woo and how to categorize it, you know, how to organize it into tiers almost. And, you know, particularly the work with archetypes just had an enormous influence on me. And I think you see that to this day, that I'm always sort of thinking in a Jungian way. It's like, well, how do we organize this? You know what I mean? So we have all this phenomena. What does it mean? Well, we can figure out what it means if we can organize it, you know, in a way that makes sense, you know, particularly makes sense to people outside, you know. So it's one of the things that I was really thinking about for a long time is like, how do I explain this to the layman? You know what I mean? Because if you hit people with this stuff, they're just going to shut off. Yeah, and with good reason too, because, you know, they have a lot of experience, again, with, like, you know, maybe a lot of people who are schizophrenic who sort of will hit them with a lot of the same stuff, but they can't organize it. They can't make sense of it.
Well, so therein lies the art. How do you explain it? That's the art.
But here's the thing. I mean, Jung had a real shadow side too. Jung, you know, I mean, he a lot of his work was questionable. You know, he's a guy who got high on his own supply, so to speak. You know, and one of the things that I've been talking about a lot lately, you know, is I think the shadow side of Jung was expressed through Alan Dulles and through, you know, Artichoke and Hilltop and Naomi and MK Ultra. I mean, all these sort of programs that I've really come to see quite clearly as having no scientific basis at all, but as just being sorcery. I mean, I'm not. Oh yeah, yeah. That is, you know, absolutely. These programs, you know, particularly when you look into, like, you know, the work that Gottlieb was doing or that you and Cameron was doing, you know, people who have looked at their papers and stuff, this is absolute nonsense. These guys had they weren't even trying to pretend to honor the scientific method. This is just pure sorcery. And, you know, and that's when I came to realize that a lot of these experiments that they were running, you know, particularly up in McGill, up in Montreal, weren't all that different from initiatory practices, rites of passage, and particularly the Mithraic, you know, the whole idea of initiation through ordeal, right? Yeah. So what I came to believe, and this is like sort of my narrative, this is my hypothesis, is that Jung and Alan Dulles spent a lot of time together in Switzerland during the war. Dulles' mistress had some sort of psychosomatic condition, I guess it was hiccups or something, and Jung was treating her. But Dulles and Jung would, like, speak every day, like they would have lunch every day, you know, they'd have these big conversations. And this is when Jung was really mad into the whole Mithraic thing, right? And if you read, like, you know, stories of his Nicene journey, and he became Leo Centophilis and all this kind of stuff, you know, it's like all these guys, you know, he got pretty out there. Like I said, he got high on his own supply. But I think what I really believe happened, and this is becoming sort of a focal point of my work, is I think that Dulles said, wow, this would make a great weapon. You know, sorcery as a weapon. Who would have even thought? You know what I mean? Like, this is truly cutting edge science. No science. You know what I mean? It's like the abandonment of science for sorcery. So I think what happened is that Jung was feeding Dulles all this kind of stuff during the war. And Dulles at the same time was going over to Sandoz and checking out their wares, right? And he brought it home. And then all these stories, that were really just propaganda stories about brainwashing came out. And he said, well, I know what we'll do. We're going to start our own brainwashing. But I think what the plan was all along was like the alchemical, maybe even like a reverse alchemical transformation of society through sorcery.
Yeah.
And, one of my pet theories right now is that, so nobody really understands where MK came from, like MK Ultra or MK Naomi or whatever. MK.
It was a CIA designation.
Yeah, but nobody can figure out what it actually means.
It doesn't mean anything, apparently.
Well, I'll tell you my theory. You want to hear my theory?
Yes, I do.
I think it means Mithras and Kybele.
Mm.
And I'll tell you why. First of all, one of the things I've done a lot on the blog is like showing like there's this Mithraic symbolism everywhere. And it's the higher you go up in the socioeconomic ladder, the more apt you're going to see Mithraic symbolism. The only problem is that people don't understand they don't know what they're looking at.
Right.
But I do.
That's part of the magic, though. That's part of it.
Yeah, it's part of the sorcery. So it's like when I went to, I remember going to Rockefeller Center. So I started working for Marvel. I was freelancing for Marvel like in 95 or so. And they were like up near the UN. They were like all the way across town. So I'd have to like do this massive trek. And a lot of times I would walk, I'd walk back and I'd walk to Rockefeller Center. And this is when I was really starting to get into, when I was reading Men and the Symbols, I was reading a lot of Jung, I was reading a lot of stuff on mythology and all this kind of stuff. And I was just like, what the hell is this place? You know what I mean? Like, how do people not see this? You go, Prometheus, it's like, that's not Prometheus, it's Mithras being born from the rock and escaping, the prison of time with the flame.
Yes.
It's just like, how more obvious could it possibly be, right? So I just started seeing all this stuff, and it took me a long time, but I really come to see that like Mithras it's almost like he's like the god that you encounter when you really get into like the heavy psych, like people talk about the machine elves and all this kind of stuff. I think like once you get past machine elves, you're going to encounter Mithras. And if you read the Mithraic liturgy, it pretty much describes that word for word. And ironically or scarily or whatever, I mean, it also reads like an alien abduction, like a classic alien abduction narrative, only they're abducted onto the bridge of the Starship Enterprise with like snake-headed people and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, I think really what happened is that Dulles was just fascinated by the mystery cults and how like the mystery cults had a really strong hold in like like I said, the Praetorian Guards, the military intelligence. I mean, like you could almost not even separate the two. So I think what happened is that like he did a lot of work, like Jung sort of turned him onto it. He got the idea that this could be weaponized, and then the rest is history. I really think that this idea that it was going to be used for brainwashing, whatever, was just absolute nonsense from the start. It was just a way to get money for these programs. And, if you just look at the way these programs are run and then you look at the effects of them, you look at the outcomes of them, it's just clearly sorcery. And I just came to realize, this sort of dovetailed with my disillusionment with science or science fictional science, like the science, like I said, that I was reading in Popular Mechanics and all these other magazines, Popular Science. You just realize
the cult.
It's just has absolutely no basis in reality, and people just accept it.
Well, they accept the theories.
Well, but
they accept theories as facts. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I say is that anything can exist on paper. So like faster than light travel can exist on paper. Mm-hmm. All these kind of things. All this wonderful magical science can exist on paper. But there's a roadblock, and the roadblock is the laws of physics. The laws of physics, at the very least, are going to slow you down, but more often are just going to shut you down. All these plans, like all this DARPA nonsense and all this stuff that people just think is somehow being worked on in an underground lab underneath the Archuleta Mesa or something. There's no basis in reality. It's all just fantasy. A lot of it was like Cold War propaganda, right. Scaring the like we're growing like super powered chimp robots or something, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Just like this absolute foolishness. But I think, you know, the Soviets were doing the same thing, you know? So the Soviets were really like big into like space travel. I know you want to talk about space. I mean, I've become like just an absolute cynic about, and skeptic.
Join the club.
Good.
Join the club.
Like nobody's, you know, it's like, oh, we're going to Mars in 2025. Okay, wait a second. All right. Let's work this out. Okay, so let's accept that, just for the sake of argument, that, you know, the Apollo landings are based in reality, right? But so for the past 50 years now, nobody's gone higher than like low Earth orbit, you know? And then we have these, I don't understand it works. You know, we're supposed to have all these satellites in the thermosphere, which is like, what, you know, 4,000 degrees or some insane thing, right?
Right.
So, but it's like, if you're going to go to Mars, right? Wouldn't you have to like, you know, it's like, you're not going to go out into the Death Valley, right? Unless you know that like every 50 miles is a gas station, right? Where you can get water and gas and maybe something to eat. It's just like, if we were really going to go to Mars,
Right.
which is like, I don't know what, 3-month trip, whatever it's supposed to be. I mean, wouldn't you want to be setting up space stations all
Along the way. Yeah.
all along
Don't
the
bring
way?
your logic here, Chris.
You know, it's like, you know what it's like. So Elon Musk saying we're going to go to Mars in 2025 is like, you know, a 5-pack a day smoker saying, I'm going to run the Boston Marathon next month. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I weigh 300 pounds and I have advanced emphysema, but I'm going to do it. You know, it's like, it's going to happen. And that's exactly what the space program is to me. It's just like, listen, if they were doing things past the space station, just let's say,
If that's even real.
But if they were doing these things, then I'd be like, well, maybe, you know, if there was, you know, like you saw in like 2001, right? So, you know, you have these like artificial gravity wells
Right.
and, you know, things, and then you have like the Clavier space and so on and so forth. So if we had that stuff now, right? I'd be like, well, maybe we're going to go to Mars, but who's going to get into a ship and travel 3,000 miles with absolutely no support in between? You know, like I said, it is literally like going out to Death Valley without stopping at a gas station. It's just absolutely insane.
And you'll
you
have
know?
to be
it's-
vaccinated to go.
Yeah, you have to be vaccinated.
That's your
So,
path.
but see, here's the thing. So this is like what I say, it's like, so the progressive myth, you know, the myth that progress is inevitable and constant and just perpetual. In order to sell that myth, you have to sell these stories about Mars missions and stuff. And, you know, the Soviets did the exact same thing. I don't know if I have them here, but I had a few issues of Soviet Life that my wife got me off of eBay. And like, you know, that was like their version of Time or Life, whatever. And it's just full of like all this space nonsense, like domed cities on Mars, you know, they're coming next year and stuff. Or on the moon, let's say, or some, you know, we're going to build a, you know, like a habitat on Ceres or, you know, one of these asteroids, whatever.
Yeah,
No,
I call those things space carrots. They're the carrots at the end of the stick to keep the space programs going, because I think they're
It's
just
bigger than that, though. It isn't just the space programs. There's all these people. There are all these people, like I said, who call themselves progressives, and they believe in this myth of like perpetual. Everything is constantly improving. That everything is working on this linear line. It's exactly the same as the old Christian dispensationalism, but everything is just progressing towards this 0 point where we'll reach nirvana, technological.
Star Trek Utopia.
Well, yeah. So you see all these like leftists and communists and socialists and everything on Twitter, and it's like, well, this is the future we want. Well, first of all, I say, if you really watch Star Trek with a critical eye, realize that it's about a military dictatorship
Yes.
that
Yes.
is fueling, you know, this imperialistic project, right? That is where imperialism, where the empire, right, where colonialism is spreading out across the galaxy, right? It's insane, you know. It's like we're going to be in like, you know, the Hyades star cluster, and then we're going to be in Sirius in 45 minutes, you know, just like they're driving to like Walmart, you know,
right.
10,000 light years at warp speed. Like warp speed is just like the most ridiculous friggin' thing. So, but you need to sell this stuff. You need to have, it is like that carrot though. It's like, you need to keep people stringing along,
Yep.
you know, because if they start to question this, then they start to question the entire project. They start to question the entire project of progressive capitalism, right? They start to question its underpinnings, and that cannot happen. You have to make them believe that, you know, in the future, Star Trek is going to happen, and all of our problems are going to be done away with. Technology and space travel is going to solve all our social issues, and war and hunger and greed and all the rest of it. And we won't even have money because, you know, the great mothership enterprise provides for all.
That's right.
You have to keep people against these myths, because if they start to question that, what are they going to question next? And this guy, another guy on Twitter, but I guess he was a guy called Movie Bob, guy up in Boston, movie critic. And he got fired. I forget where he was working, but he got fired for like some tweet that, you know, this whole cancellation thing.
Oh,
but
boy.
he had said, like, I don't know if it was after, I think it was after the 2016 election, like, you know, these damn rednecks, you know, if it wasn't for these voters, you know, I would have a robot body and I would be eternal and I'd be flying off to another space cluster. And it's like all this science fictional nonsense, because this is just a, you know, a chubby nerd who spent his entire life sitting in a theater seat, right? And believing all the nonsense that he was fed by Hollywood. But, you know, this inspires people to hate other people because they're standing in the way of my robot body. Nobody's ever going to have a robot body. Nobody's ever going to be uploaded into a computer. You know, it's like things like the singularity and transhumanism. And, you know, like actual scientists who actually work in these fields are embarrassed by this stuff. They really are. And it's like, if you dig beneath the surface, you know, people who have no real understanding of science think that, oh, they're all into transhumanism. They're all into the singularity. No, they're not. They think this is a joke, but they're all afraid of getting on, what's that guy's name? Kurzweil's bad side, you know, because he's so influential.
Yes.
But it's just all lies, you know, it's just all nonsense. And once you, like, this is another thing that when you wake up from it, I mean, I think a lot of people realize that. I mean, I don't think people are that stupid that they think that we're going to Mars in 2025. I think there's just some sort of cognitive dissonance that takes over, you know, that they just accept this stuff because they need to think that there's some pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, you know? And it's just like, we don't need to go to any other planets.
Right.
You know, first of all, I don't think.
Do you see, Chris, that if we step back and look at Jung's model again and look at the idea of collective projection and the hero's journey, just to simplify it, that seems to me what has been played, that card's been played all along with the whole space thing.
Oh yeah. Like the right stuff, right?
Yes.
The right stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
It's like we got to give people, they've got to give them something to shoot for, project onto. Meanwhile, while that's all happening, there's all this other more nefarious stuff that's not, you know, there's this mechanics behind the curtain happening, and everyone's projecting on going to Mars in 2025.
Well,
because they've got to escape, right? We got to move. We got to leave.
There are two big problems with just being a human being, particularly being a human being in a civilization where you don't have to like hunt for food or find shelter every day, right? You know, that your basic material needs are taken care of. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? There are two problems. First of all, boredom. I think boredom is, you know, I've actually been working on an essay about boredom and what a corrosive power boredom has and how destructive it is and how so many things are just sort of undone. And I actually read, like, I don't know if it was C.S. Lewis, that maybe Tolkien or something. No, it was Tolkien, right? And he talked about how, like, you know, the problem with the good and creating a good society is that people become bored with it. It's just basic human nature, right? But on the flip side of that boredom, which I think is a very dangerous thing, right, is people need something to look forward to.
Yes,
you know?
It's a big deal. Very big deal.
You need some, you know, you need goals, you know, you need to be shooting something. And I think the great genius of the quote unquote program was just creating this artificial world, like, you know, like I said, like Star Trek. But it, you know, getting back to what Gordon said about like the, you know, the national security state. So it's like I had done some work into the creation of Star Trek, right? And you realize that like Gene Roddenberry, like this drugged out, drunk, sex maniac grifter, you know,
didn't he channel a lot of those stories too?
No. He was too busy chasing like his secretaries around the desk. No, I mean, I haven't really dotted the I's and crossed the T's yet, but I believe that it was a naval intelligence program, that it was naval intelligence all along, because really what I think the real creator of Star Trek was Leslie Stevens, who also created the Outer Limits, and whose father was like the highest of all high-ranking admirals of all time, and invented all this stuff, and was basically running the Cold War program and everything like that. So, I mean, I think that Star Trek was a military, specifically naval intelligence program. And I think, you know, it was very effective. It was very effective during like the 60s, you know, like the upheavals of the late 60s, you know, particularly more so in the 70s, you know, because it became more popular in reruns and so on. And I think that it served a purpose because it gave people something to look forward to. You know, what they called the Roddenberry future, you know, which again, it's not really Roddenberry. I mean, it's all these other writers and producers who actually created all the stuff that we know we would recognize as Star Trek. If you read like his original pitch, it's the dumbest thing you've ever read in your life. But, you know, but the genius of it was to give people something to look forward to. People need to feel like there's a reason up in the morning, you know, because you know, I'm going to be doing this, you know. But the thing that I came to realize, you know, after this hideous 10-year at least sort of ordeal that I was thrust into, is that everything's right here. It's all here. We don't need to go anywhere else. This planet is fucking huge. You know, human beings cover about 5% of the Earth's land mass, which is only 9% of the surface, because 71% of it is water. So it's like there is all the space you could possibly want to explore right here on Earth, like right here in our biosphere, right here in, like, you know, home, right? We don't need to leave home. We don't need to go to friggin' Mars, because we don't even know what's at the bottom of the goddamn ocean. There could be like alien cities that are 10 times the size of Manhattan spread across the Pacific Basin, and we have no idea because nobody's ever been down there.
It's probably where all those new UFOs are coming from.
It could be. I mean, listen, a lot of people think so.
I do.
Well, but you know, isn't it important that with the light that you're talking about, with the projection factor of and projection works on all levels. It can be a bad thing with shadow projection, or it can be an egoic projection, which is going to Mars. But with the light at the end of the tunnel kind of scenario, which we've all just witnessed lifetime with this whole lockdown thing, where they take everything away, the whole Hegelian thing, they take everything away. Who took that away from us? Who took that away? And that, you know, when we start questioning that, but then they start giving you back pieces with the promise that you'll get back what you had lost, what had been taken away. And so with this whole idea on a bigger level,
minus the VIG,
but with this idea is you have to give people that, but this is a way to train. This is how you break a horse. This is how you train, domesticate stock. And this is happening. This has been happening a very long time to humans. But
it's also a form of trauma-based mind control.
It's exactly trauma-based. It is exactly that. I would just try not to say that.
Sorry.
But it's the same thing. And that's what I'm saying. If you don't, so you want to get control, you've lost control, and you want to get control, you've got to have these kinds of really worked out plans. And we, like I said, we just witnessed this. We're in the middle of it right now. So the light at the end of the tunnel, the calm, beautiful day after a storm, what did we lose? where are we going? What's the real story here? And this is where we start having these types of conversations when we're questioning these realities. So it's more than that, is what I'm saying. I think there is obviously some sort of agenda. Why would big people who are allegedly in charge of us come together and create scenarios? It's all ritual theater, the way I see it.
Yeah, it is ritual theater. It is. It absolutely is. But I mean, personally for me, like, nothing changed for me, you know. Like, I've been like socially distancing for 25 years, you know.
Yeah, well, a lot of us,
here.
but you see what happens
like to,
to the masses.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, it is. Yeah, but it's, I know. I do know what you were saying. But the thing is, people allowed it to happen.
Yes.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
And people stood by and let it happen, because I think the whole situation was very poorly run. And I think that's why they, you know, gave old Billy Boy the, you know, I think that it was just, it's very inept. But see, the thing is that there's a problem with the world that they want to create. And, you know, it's like, listen, I mean, my political philosophy just basically boils down to, it's like, I want everybody to be happy and I want everything to work out okay. You know, I mean, that's like that's my basic political philosophy. I've said it before, I'll say it again. If I thought that this technological or technocratic dream world that they're trying to create was going to work, you know, I might not be happy about it. You know, I might not support it or be enthusiastic about it, but I'd be like, hey, you know, whatever. I think the problem, there's a couple problems here, is that the world that they're creating and the world that they've created for the past 25 years has led to a major problem, and that's the loss of expertise.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I remember going to see Timothy Leary at the Learning Annex of all places in New York back in 92 or 93. And he was talking about, you know, the internet and virtual reality and all this nonsense. And I remember telling him, I said, you know, I raised my hand and be like, you know, what's going to happen if like somebody knows how to use a hammer in cyberspace, but they don't know how to use a hammer in the real world? You know what I mean? And I kept sort of asking those kind of questions, like, you know, you don't realize that like the real world has to be attended to. You have to have real world skills. You know, one of the great examples is that they recently had that Colonial Pipeline shut down with the hacking and so on. And, you know, one of the guys who worked for the company got up and it's like, well, how did this happen? You know, did you have safeguards and everything like that? And, you know, he told Congress, he said, you know, all the people who knew how to manually operate an oil pipeline are either dead or have retired. Like, these young kids have all grown up with this computer programs. They don't know how to do anything. You know, they don't know how to bypass, you know, some sort of shutdown or what, I don't even know what the terminology would be. They don't know how to do it. I mean, look at this whole thing, like millennials who don't know how to like iron a shirt or like sew a button back on or drive a stick shift, right? I mean, it's true. It's really true. And
I used to have a friend who wrote switching software on telephone lines, like high-speed switching stuff. And one of the impetuses behind getting rid of those landlines, all those, you know, POTS lines, was because the people who wrote all the software were dead. Plus, it was 30 years old, and nobody knew how to maintain it much anymore. So it was easier just to replace all that with digital stuff and get rid of the analog. Nobody knew how it worked anymore.
Well, we're on the, listen, this is one of the reasons, like I said, that we're in for a bad next maybe 10, 20, 30 years, because I think expertise is peaked. I think technology is peaked. And I think, you know, if you've seen the movie, the movie Idiocracy.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I think that, you know, I mean, that's obviously, you know, a comedy. It's obviously, you know, a farce and exaggerated, but I think, you know, we're getting to a point now, like I said, when people don't know how to operate an oil pipeline, without which the economy cannot operate, without which basic human life can't operate anymore, right? If people don't know how to operate that manually without the power on, we're screwed. but you can just up and down the line, you know. I mean, that's just an extreme, not even an extreme example. That's just an example, a notable example, or at least an example I remember of this kind of thing. But I see this all the time. Like I said, it's like, you know, before the show started, I was talking about like these updates to these Macintosh programs. It's just like the software just gets slower and slower and buggier and buggier. And, you know, one of the problems is like, you know, the big techs are all monopolies now, essentially, or de facto monopolies.
Yes.
So they don't have any incentive.
Any reason to make it good, yeah.
Yeah, they don't have any incentive to fix this stuff. You know, they don't care. You know what I mean? They have all, I mean, we're looking at companies with $1 trillion valuation now. They don't care anymore. And it just becomes this cascading effect, you know, with like one node switches off or blinks out. And, you know, there's redundancy built into the system where you can lose a bunch of those nodes. But after a while, you get into what's called, you know, a cascading failure, where it's just like, the failure becomes its own momentum.
Yeah, the redundant nodes can't handle the load.
And, you know, I mean, we've got a lot of kids who just, they don't know anything anymore. You know, they play video games, or they're just taught all this nonsense in schools. I mean, I'm really concerned about like just practical knowledge. You know, it's like, I want people to like start learning trades again, you know, because they're gonna have to. You know, I want people to know how to like do things with their hands again.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. The whole trade aspect of everything, the trade market where you learn a trade, and the apprenticeship programs, this all needs to come back in ASAP, because we are in some big trouble ahead, just logistic wise, as far as how we live our daily lives.
Can you imagine what would happen if the internet went down for 6 months?
At least
be chaos. It would be complete
in the
chaos.
Western world, for sure. It would be absolute chaos. And,
well, like you said, we don't have the phone system. Okay, so 20 years ago, if the internet went down, we still had the landlines.
Yes.
We don't even have the landlines anymore. We don't have television anymore because it's all digital. If the internet goes down, that's the end of everything.
Yep.
But yeah,
looking forward to it.
I think we've outsmarted ourselves in a lot of ways, but it's this kind of short-term thinking, because, you know, one thing that I've always known about, like, you know, again, like software upgrades, it's not driven by engineers. It's not driven by people, computer scientists. It's driven by the sales department.
Yes.
You know, the sales department's
Some
like
software is.
Okay. Well, I'm talking like commercial software.
Okay. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So commercial software is driven by sales, right? And this is something that I've noticed, because, you know, one thing I've said is like, I've done a lot of work, and I do a lot of work in Adobe Illustrator. That program has like had, you know, a few extra bells and whistles, but I've been working on that program for over 30 years now. And it's not fundamentally different than it was 30 years ago. You know, it's like the work that
Except for now you have to have it on the cloud, and you can't have the program on your computer.
Well, that's the other thing. Now it takes, you know, because of this whole cloud issue, right?
Yeah.
The program takes like 15 minutes to open, and half the time won't open. I'll have to quit and start it over again. I mean, but Adobe doesn't care.
And you don't own it. In the past,
yeah.
You owned it and you had it on your computer. Now you have to upgrade. You don't own your content. It's a subscription. It's bad. It's terrible.
You'll own nothing and be happy.
Yeah. Well,
and there we have it.
You'll own nothing. See, but here's the thing. But like, so I talk about like boredom is a serious issue, and having something to look forward to is an issue. But I think another issue that I think the technocrats haven't really taken into account is that people have to feel like they have a stake. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For people to do good work or even acceptable work, they have to feel like they have a stake in it. Like that isn't just like, they're not just serfs. You know, they have to feel like they're part of something, like that they own something. They have something to call their own. And I think this just insane Hegelian mindset that's taken over among big tech and so on, they don't take this stuff into account. And this is, you know, one of the problems is, and I hope people will forgive me for this, but it's like when I was a kid, when you were a kid, when you were born, right? 1 in 10,000 kids were born with autism.
Yeah.
Now it's 1 in 88.
Yep.
Okay. So like, yeah,
Yeah.
so like kids who are autistic can sometimes, you know, if they're not too far deep into the spectrum, if they're more on the Asperger's end of the scale, you know, they can be good software and so on.
Thank you.
So they can be good software engineers and so on. But a lot of, you know, the people on the spectrum that like, they don't have basic social skills. They don't have basic empathy skills. They can't maintain relationships. You know, there's just a lot of problems with just like with humaning, you know, with just basic humaning, you know. And again, this whole
driven software.
Yeah, the sales driven software and this whole like quarterly mentality, you know, keeping the numbers up for the quarterly reports and so on. It's created this cycle of doom, I think. You know?
I like that.
I think it has. I mean, if you're in software, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about.
I am. Luckily for me, my company is focused on customer for the most part. Customers will look at our software and go, you know, it'd be better if the workflow is this way. You know, we don't get much from sales unless it comes from a customer. But we're not.
That's great.
We're not building, you know, Palantir accounting software, which is something that would be sales driven, or SAS or Oracle. You know, those kind of things are done.
Yeah, I know exactly. Yeah, my uncle works for Oracle.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he's got like 12 patents to his name too.
Nice.
But it's all cloud stuff.
Oh, you reminded me something I wanted to bring up before. I didn't get a chance to. You were talking about the MK programs being sorcery and that whole conversation part. Have you ever looked at the patents of, I brought this up last week or 2 weeks ago too, the patents of, I think it's John St. Clair?
Not the White Panther guy, is it?
No. Got all these weird patents for like a teleporter and a light speed engine and crap like that. But they all have like Solomonic ritual elements to them. It's really wild.
Well, see, but that's one of the problems with patent science is that, you know, just because something's a patent doesn't mean it's an operable.
I completely
system.
Understand that.
But what you're saying speaks a lot, you know, that one of the realizations that I've come to recently is that, you know, like science does not run the world, sorcery runs the world. And a lot of what we think is science or technology is actually like sorcery with window dressing.
Oh yeah.
And again, I mean, this is something that gets me into trouble with some people, but listen, I've given this a lot of thought. You know,
the thing is, it's not new, Chris. It's gone back as far back as people first discovered how to manipulate the raw elements.
Well, you know, but you bring up a good point, because look at like a lot of the work that was done in stone.
Yes.
Right? For thousands of years.
Yes.
You know, like some of this amazing stonework that was done, you know, like these giant underground temples in India or whatever.
Palmyra.
Oh, exactly. Well, that's a great example too. But all these kind of things, it's like, you know, the engineering and the science is going to get you to a certain point. But like you get to a point where like there's all these like bizarre sort of harmonic reverberations in these things that, you know, you can't really account for, that you can't really devise a science around, you know, like at some point that kind of craftsmanship and that kind of engineering, like it almost like it takes off and it enters high orbit, because we live in a world, you know, where nature calls the shots, and nature is an essentially magical place, right?
Yes.
And sorcery and magic and all these kind of things are very much about, you know, harmonizing or trying to harmonize yourself with that power. You know, I think the good stuff is the stuff where you try to harmonize yourself with the powers of nature and the energies and forces of nature, and the bad stuff is where you try to solicit the services of unclean energies and unclean spirits and so on. So but there you go. But the point is taken is that like we look back and look at all these things. It's like, oh, that's got to be aliens or something. It's like, no, it wasn't aliens. It's like they just knew what they were doing, and they were doing it for a long time, you know. And the knowledge was passed down father to son, and it's at a certain point, you know, you just break through and you reach a totally different level.
Yeah, and that's where I was going with the sorcery and the MK programs, is that sorcery, magic, whatever you want to call it, is an ancient technology of some sort that was lost. I don't want to blame the Christians for it, or, you know, the church, but at some point humans knew that stuff innately, and it's a lost art. And I think some of the, if you're right about the sorcery, and that is kind of how I think about it too, they're rediscovering it.
Well, you know, you have to sort of free yourself from like Enlightenment brainwashing and Enlightenment propaganda, because there's a kind of mythology that's arisen, you know, particularly of like the church. A lot of like the anti-science stuff sort of came with like the Reformation, the Protestant Reformation, you know, particularly like Calvinism. You know, this whole myth that like, you know, bishops were just running around looking for scientists to burn. It's just,
oh no, I know it wasn't.
It's absolutely not. And believe me, they were practicing a lot. Like,
there's a lot of crossover.
Yeah, there was a lot of these arts and sciences were being practiced in secret in monasteries and so on. I think the thing, it wasn't Christianity per se, but it was that whatever happened in like the 6th century, 5th and 6th century, where like, some people think there was some sort of like massive volcano explosion, and, you know, like the crops wouldn't grow for decades. I mean, there was just this huge worldwide sort of blackout, you know, with what we now call the Dark Ages, right? But it was really this period, like late mid Byzantine period, like following the fall of Saccharum by the Visigoths and so on. That was like, things were lost because everything was lost. I mean, people were just starving. You know, there were all these kind of plagues running around, like, what was it, the Justinian plague and so on. And then, you know, in the Middle Ages, we had the Black Death and so on. So I think that there's this mythology that the church, and let's just say the institutional church, was anti-science, and it's just not true. I mean, they were studying like Ovid in the monasteries too. I mean, they were studying, you know, quote unquote, what they called the virtuous pagans, right? So I think that there was always this mythology that arose really during the Enlightenment, that there was some sort of demarcation between the pagan world, and then the Christians came along and they destroyed everything, and it was like Stalinist year zero. And it's just not true. A lot of it was environmental, and a lot of it was just like, you know, one thing that I've been talking about, you know, the cities basically have like built-in auto-destruct buttons, right?
Yeah.
And Rome just became so disgusting and so filthy and so overrun, you know, so disease-ridden, and just the injustice of it all. I mean, like, one of the things people don't realize when they talk about like the quote-unquote pagan world, which is again sort of another myth, because if you really look at like the state cults, particularly the solar cults, they're not significantly different from Christianity in any way, shape, or form, but they were also like phenomenally unjust, because they still sort of believe that whole pagan idea of hierarchies and men being bestowed by the gods and demigods and so on, and the emperors all had to be worshipped as gods. I mean, all this kind of, you know, malignant, maleficent nonsense about, you know, godliness and all this kind of thing, hierarchical, right? So it was just phenomenally unjust. And I think what powered Christianity, and I think what a lot of people overlook, is just the incredible economic injustice, the social injustice, the disease, the overcrowding, and so on. Because, you know, one thing that I've said a lot before in other interviews is like the feudal system really arose because if you were like a Roman knight, you were given a land grant, and then when things really started to fall apart in Rome, and you had like the Goths and the Visigoths and this and the Celts and all these people sort of running through, destroying everything time after time, life just became unviable there. So they moved to country homes, and they just started raising farms and livestock and everything like that. So we tend to want to look back through this Enlightenment lens and sort of cast moral judgment on Christianity in the Middle Ages, but it's all just propaganda. A lot of it, to be perfectly frank, is Masonic propaganda. I mean, a lot of it is written and driven by Freemasonry, you know? So it's just absolutely not true. And no, like, well, I guess we're sort of losing, I mean, we're seriously losing the science of history in the colleges right now.
Yes.
Oh my God.
But, you know, say like, I don't know, 50 years ago, like somebody like a Will Durant, you know, like a serious Roman scholar, if you try to tell him all this nonsense, this, you know, something that, you know, was written by, gosh, what's the name of that guy? You know, the rise and fall of Rome and all this kind of stuff. It was just like, that's just nonsense. It's just all propaganda. So we have to sort of expunge our brains of that kind of misinformation the same way we need to expunge our brains of all this Hollywood programming about like the space program and stuff. See, because like, you know, the mythology of progression and of progressivism, again, is that it's this constant process that should be perpetual, but it's only stopped by like, you know, those mean rednecks from the sticks, you know, whether they're Visigoths or Christians or Muslims or whoever, you know, whoever throughout history is blamed for the inevitable and perfectly natural breakdown of social progress, you know. You know, again, it's just something that happens. And what we're experiencing now is something that happens. It's happened before, it's going to happen again. And what we're facing, what we're looking down the barrel of right now is it's inevitable. And like I said, like getting back to the whole thing with synchromysticism, when you are able to study, you know, what I call sort of looking at real life, or what we call real life, through the prism of dream logic. And that's really how I would describe that. If, you know, you asked me for a one sentence description. When you look at the things, when you break them down to the symbols and the signs and the semiotics and the memes and all these kind of things, you just have to realize that everything works in cycles and everything works adhering to patterns.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. I 100% agree. It's all cycles. And I think a lot of cycles are ending right now.
It's true. Yeah. It's, you know, in a lot of ways it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
You know? But,
oh yeah, everything's changed. But at the same time, new cycles begin. And so somewhere there's going to have to be a bridge. I'm not sure how that's going to happen because we're erasing our historical context in this last couple years, 3 years or 4 years.
God.
And, you know, where do we go when you can't buy books anymore? And I mean, some of this stuff is just fucked. You know, some of the stuff where the structure, the architecture of what is coming into play is set, and you know they're being built now. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because as we all know, a lot of people capitulated with this mass trauma event of the last year and a half, and shockingly so. At what point are we going to hit this tipping point? Are the people that want to see something different than what we see right now down the road going to stand up and help find a detour around it? Are we fated to move through all of this crap that we can clearly see ahead of us? It's, you know, it's up in the air.
It is up in the air, but I think that, you know, like I said, nature gets a vote. You know,
I vote for nature myself.
Well,
nature is my teacher in the end.
But what I mean by that is that if your worldview and sort of your social plan is built around defiance of nature, nature gets a say in whether that plan will succeed and go forward.
100%.
You know, what we see so much of, and I just can't help but wondering if there's some sort of setup, you know, I just like, are we just witnessing some giant sting operation? But so much of what we see is like defiance of nature, and not just like the natural world, what we call the natural world, but just like human nature. And just
it's like the fact of artifice, right?
The nature of systems, you know,
Yeah.
that systems have a nature. Systems work along certain parameters, and they don't work when you just start changing things willy-nilly. You know, if you're writing, like say you're writing a computer program, right? And you're just like, oh, I don't like this line of code. I don't know why I don't like it. I don't like the way it looks. I'm going to erase it. And that one, you just start taking out all these lines of code at random. It's like, this is going to work better. This is going to work because I say it's going to work better. And if you disagree with me, man, I'm going to like unperson you, you know, I'm going to like, you're done, you know, I'm going to deplatform you, unperson you, whatever, because this is the way I say it's going to work. And, you know, and people think that they can get away with that shit. And we just see it all over, you know, everybody's like, I'm going to like, just try to complete, you know, a lot of his ego. It's like, I'm just going to completely rework this system. I'm just going to, you know, like math is racist, you know, whatever, spelling is racist, like all this kind of stuff. It's just like, I'm just going to change it because, you know, this weird cultic mentality that's taken over. And it's like, well, you know what? Good luck to you. Good luck to you. You know, good luck to all of us, because complex systems work along complex lines. You know, you can't simplify it because you don't like that complexity anymore. You can't change the nature of something because you're struck by this notion, or you're bored with it, or whatever the case may be. That's just like, I'm just going to change the system. You know, it's like, I'm going to make pancakes with sawdust or motor oil.
Well, wait, they already put
yeah,
sawdust
right. They do,
everything.
right? No, so, but it's like, I'm going to make pancakes with sand and motor oil. They're going to be good. They're going to be delicious, you know? And if you disagree with me, man, that's because, you know, you're a counter-revolutionary, because this is the sand and motor oil pancake revolution. You know what I mean? So it's just like, no, you can't do that. You can't do these things. You know, it's just like the system is going to collapse. So I just can't help but wonder, is there some, and I don't let myself get dragged into these kind of mind games anymore. It's like, well, this is like, you know, ends up like, you end up like in Q world, you know what I mean? Where it's just like, you don't understand, you know, he woke up and wrote Kovefi on Twitter because it's seventh dimensional chess, and he really meant, you know, COVID is going to be this. No, it's just like, no, you know, it's like that's where that kind of speculation, and it almost becomes like a form of wish fulfillment. That's where it gets you. And it's like, I just like, oh, you know, listen, it's not my job to worry about it. I'm going to worry about what I worry about. And, you know, come what may, you know, I'll deal with this other bullshit when I have to deal with it. But it's just like, I think the world would be a lot better if people just said, I'm going to just do my job really well, rather than like I said, I'm going to like create a computer program with a matchbook, tinfoil, and a rubber band. You know, that's how I'm going to create my computer. And if that computer doesn't work because of counter-revolutionary forces lurking everywhere, you know, white supremacist forces just allowing me to make my computer out of a rubber band, some, you know, bits of tinfoil that I took out of recycling, and a matchbook. You know, it's just like, no, things have to work a certain way. But, you know, people are going to have to learn that all over again, and we're all going to pay for it. But, you know, when you study the natural world, you this is again what I'm saying. It's like you aren't going to enjoy what happens, but you sort of have this inner peace. Like, it's like, yeah, there are no guarantees in this life. You know,
yes.
This whole idea that there is a guarantee in this life, and that's part of our problem. You know, because it creates like a. Go ahead. That
created this whole thing, safety, right? The guarantee of safety.
Yes, be safe. When people tell me to be safe, I just like. Yeah, I'm gonna go just like crawl over hot coals, just because I don't want to be safe. You know? Can't stand me. You know, it's like, when did this whole thing like be safe? Like, that's like, you know, it used to be goodbye.
Right.
You know, somebody would say God bless you, or whatever. I mean, whatever. People would say good luck, and now it's be safe. It's like,
it's on all the billboards and everything. It's a thing. And the projection of what you're doing. So by not participating in a mass psyop, you're the enemy, right?
Yes.
I've been the enemy my whole life.
Yes.
So
Well, all three of us, welcome to the Outsiders
yeah,
Club.
yeah.
Have you
the
seen
Outsiders.
Have you seen Demolition Man lately?
Actually, I didn't watch the whole thing, but I was watching some of it, and the scenes with Sandra Bullock, and it's a little too close to home these
I know,
days.
it's
doesn't it?
creepy. It's creepy. Well, I think this is a great point to end it. Good notes here. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been a great conversation. Do you want to plug your stuff?
Yeah. So go to secretsun.blogspot.com, and that will kind of, if you go to the web page rather than on your phone, you'll see all sorts of links to like the Patreon and the Secret History of Rock and Roll blog and just all the other stuff I'm doing. And like I said, I've got so much going on right now. And, like the Patreon, I didn't want to just have it be like just another blog. Like,
Right.
I'm just going to charge for the Secret Sun right now. It's like, I'm going to do that. I was like, this is like a new thing. And this is going to be sort of like, as structured as sort of my ADD, OCD brain can manage, but like, it's just more in depth and hopefully a little bit more structured.
Great.
Well,
Great.
thank you, Chris. This has been a great pleasure and a really engaging conversation with you. I very much enjoyed it. Thank you.
Me too. Thanks
you.
a lot. Thank you. And thank everyone for listening. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with, I forget who's going to be on. I'm a spaz. I think it's Dan Shukas,
Oh yeah, the Cosmic
Keys
Keys.
podcast. Have you been on that show?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. So Dan's
Dan's
gonna be-
awesome.
Yeah, Dan's great. And then we've got Barsky in 4 weeks from then, I think so.
Oh, excellent. Weaving Spiders.
Gordon White's going to come on too. He said. So we'll have Gordon back. So thanks everyone for listening. We really appreciate you, and we'll see you next time. Take care.